The gray sky seemed to press down on the cratered earth, where fear hung as heavy as the morning mist. In the heart of a minefield forgotten by diplomacy, a besieged village awaited a miracle or its final destruction. Troops stood ready, but no soldier dared advance. At the center of the tension, General August Thorne, known for his coldness and ruthless methods, watched with disdain the small crowd of civilians huddled at the edge of the security perimeter. His hard eyes, shaped by decades of conflict, examined each face with the precision of a predator assessing its prey. "Someone's gotta do something," a voice murmured from among the villagers. The general slowly turned, his epaulettes gleaming even in the dim light of the overcast day. He was an imposing figure, nearly 7 feet tall, with a scar that bisected his left cheek, a souvenir of a blast in Kosovo that had killed 3 of his men. His reputation preceded him like a shadow. He was known for never retreating, never negotiating, and never showing weakness. "Someone?" His voice cut through the air like a knife. "You think this is a game? There are at least a dozen explosive devices buried in this field. My military engineers, trained at the best academies in the world, refuse to advance without specialized equipment that will take 3 days to arrive. And you, simple country folk, think someone can solve this?" He spat on the ground, a gesture that displayed his utter contempt for the situation and the people present. The crowd shrank before the general's harshness. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts, and the men lowered their eyes. There was something about Thorne's bearing that intimidated even the bravest. He had built his career on the premise that only strength and authority could maintain order in times of chaos. Then a figure emerged from the crowd. She was a woman of average height, about 40 years old, wearing a simple, faded cotton dress and a worn apron. Her hands were stained with dirt, evidence of her work in the small garden she kept in the back of her modest home. Her slightly grayed brown hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her bare feet trod carefully on the uneven ground. Her name was Isabella Reyes. She was not a soldier, nor an engineer, nor an explosives expert. She was just a villager, a woman with calloused hands, who tended a small garden and the war orphans. She worked as an assistant at the local school, helped the neediest families, and was known for her quiet kindness. No one there knew much about her past, only that she had arrived in the village about 8 years ago, alone, and had since become part of the community like a stone finding its place in a riverbed. General Thorne observed her with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. "And you are exactly who?" His voice dripped with sarcasm. Isabella kept her eyes down, but her voice was firm. "I'm not an expert in anything, General, but I know that if nobody does something, these children will die." She gestured slightly toward a group of boys and girls who watched her with wide eyes. "And I know your men won't risk their lives for us." The implied insult hit the general like a punch to the stomach. He stepped forward, his voice rising dangerously. "You dare question the courage of my soldiers? These men have fought on 3 continents, faced terrorists, rebels, and entire armies. I won't allow some gardener to lecture me on warfare." The audience watched in tense silence. The embedded military journalist discreetly began filming, realizing he was witnessing something that could become significant. Soldiers instinctively positioned themselves, ready to intervene if necessary. Isabella raised her eyes for the first time, meeting the general's furious gaze. There was something in those eyes, a depth that didn't match her simple appearance. For a moment, almost imperceptible, the general hesitated. There was something familiar in that look, something that stirred a distant memory he couldn't identify. "I don't question anyone's courage," she said calmly, but I question whether there is courage in letting innocent children pay for wars they didn't start." The general felt a surge of anger. How dare that insignificant woman confront him publicly? He had commanded operations in 5 different countries, had received decorations from 3 presidents, had been on the cover of international military magazines. And now a peasant woman is questioning his authority in front of his own men? "Very well," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "If you're so brave, so wise, then do it yourself. Go over there and disarm the bombs. Prove you're right." He pointed to the minefield with a dramatic gesture. "But when you blow to smithereens, don't come crying to me for not warning you about your stupidity." A murmur of shock ran through the crowd. Some villagers tried to protest, but Isabella raised her hand, silencing them. The challenge had been issued publicly in front of dozens of witnesses. There was no turning back. "I accept," she said simply. The general smiled cruelly. "Perfect. But I want everyone to see what happens when amateurs play with serious things." He turned to the journalist. "Record everything. I want this to be a lesson to any other idealist who thinks good intentions replace technical knowledge." Isabella walked slowly toward the marked perimeter. Each step was calculated, not out of fear, but out of a keen awareness of every irregularity of the terrain. Her bare feet seemed to sense the ground in a way that transcended common sense. She stopped at the edge of the minefield and knelt down, her hands touching the earth with the reverence of a prayer. The general crossed his arms, awaiting the macabre spectacle to come. But something about Isabella's demeanor unsettled him. There was no desperation in her movements, nor the hesitation he'd expect from someone facing certain death. There was a kind of familiarity. "You know what you're doing?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "No," she replied, her eyes fixed on the ground. "But I know that if I don't try, no one else will." With the eyes of soldiers and civilians fixed on her, Isabella began to work. Her hands moved over the soil with a delicacy that contrasted sharply with the brutality of the situation. She wore no gloves, no protective gear, only a trowel she'd brought from her garden. Each movement was precise, almost ritualistic. Tension mounted with each passing second. A young soldier muttered to his companion, "She's going to die." The embedded journalist whispered to his camera, "We're witnessing what may be a heroic suicide or an impossible miracle." But Isabella's eyes remained calm. With gentle movements, she brushed the soil away, grain by grain, as if each particle of earth were precious. Her hands seemed to intuitively know where to dig and where to avoid. Then something unbelievable happened. Isabella began to sing. It was an ancient lullaby, a melody the elders said was used to soothe spirits during wartime. Her low, melodious voice echoed amongst the soldiers like an antidote to terror. It was a song in a language few recognized, yet it touched something deep within the soul of everyone who heard it. General Thorne felt a shiver run down his spine. That melody, he knew it. From somewhere, from some time, his mind refused to accept. His hands began to tremble imperceptibly, and he hid them behind his back. Isabella's song had a hypnotic effect. Birds, silenced for days by the constant noise of military machinery, began to sing along. The wind, for a moment, ceased. Even the most hardened soldiers seemed to relax slightly, as if an ancient and comforting force had descended upon that cursed place. Isabella stopped singing, and her sweaty hands rested on something metallic buried in the soil. It was the first device. With a gesture no military technician would dare make, she gently pressed the center of the artifact, not to activate it, but to feel it, as if she could understand its intentions through touch. The general held his breath. Everyone there knew that one wrong move meant instant death, not only for Isabella, but potentially for everyone within a 50-meter radius. But she seemed completely serene, as if tending a flower in her garden. And then, with an almost imperceptible movement, she turned a small latch and carefully removed the device with the lightness of someone removing a splinter from a child's finger. The dry click of the latch disengaging echoed like thunder in the absolute silence. The crowd collectively held its breath. Isabella had disarmed the first explosive with an ease that defied all military logic. But she didn't stop. She moved to the next marked position, her hands already knowing exactly where to dig. General Thorne felt his legs weaken. Those movements, that precision, that supernatural calm. Memories began to form in his mind, fragments of a past he'd tried to forget. Isabella continued to work, disarming each device with a competence that left the military specialists speechless. But it wasn't just technical competence. There was something more, something that transcended conventional knowledge. It was as if she could feel the soul of the machines of death and persuade them to rest. While working on the fifth device, she spoke without looking up. "General, do you remember Operation Desert Storm? Sector 7, Grid 324? Marchetti's world crumbled. Those coordinates, that place, how could she know? Only one person knew that specific information, and that person had died 8 years ago, or so he believed. "Impossible," he murmured, his voice hoarse. You can't be." Isabella smiled sadly, but continued working. "Colonel Isabella Reyes, 3rd Military Engineering Battalion, Explosive Ordnance Disposal Specialist. Or at least, that's what I used to be." The shock that ran through the general was almost physical. Colonel Isadora Mendez had been one of the Army's best explosive ordnance disposal specialists, a prodigious military engineer who had saved hundreds of lives in mine-clearing operations. She had been his protégé, almost like a daughter to him. Until, but you died," he whispered, his voice cracking. "The report said you died in the weapons depot explosion. I signed the death certificate myself." Isabella disarmed another device before answering. "I almost died, General, but not in the way you think." Her voice carried a profound sadness, but there was no bitterness. "When I discovered I was being used as a scapegoat to cover up arms smuggling, when I saw that my own commander had forged evidence to incriminate me, when I realized that my entire career had been sacrificed to protect corrupt politicians, that day, a part of me truly died." The memories returned like an avalanche to General Thorne. 8 years ago, during an investigation into the disappearance of military weapons, someone needed to be held accountable. Isabella, brilliant and idealistic, had uncovered the corruption scheme involving high-ranking officers and influential politicians. She had become a problem. He remembered the pressure he'd received from superiors, the veiled threats, the suggestion that it would be better for everyone if the case were resolved quickly. He remembered how easy it had been to plant evidence, forge documents, turn the investigator into the investigated. Isabella had been accused of being responsible for the very smuggling she had uncovered. "I tried to protect you," he said, his voice cracking, "but the orders came from very high up. I had no choice." Isabella stopped working and looked him directly in the eyes for the first time. "We always have a choice, General. You chose your career over the truth. You chose to protect your position instead of protecting those who trusted you." The ensuing silence was deafening. The soldiers and civilians present began to realize they were witnessing something far deeper than a simple confrontation. A story was unfolding, a truth being unearthed alongside those explosives. This is where we ask you, watching this incredible story of courage and redemption, to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell.
Stories like this, which remind us of the power of truth and the importance of never giving up on our principles, deserve to be shared. You are part of this journey, and every subscription motivates us to continue bringing narratives that touch the heart and transform perspectives. Now, let's find out how this extraordinary story unfolds. Isabella returned to her work, but now her words flowed like a liberating confession. After the court-martial, after losing my career, my reputation, my identity, I went into hiding. I changed my name, came to this God-forsaken place. I thought I could find peace taking care of children and planting flowers. I thought I could forget who I was. She disarmed 3 more devices as she spoke, her movements now faster, more confident. It was as if each disarmed explosive was a wound being healed, an injustice being rectified. But the truth is, we can't outrun ourselves, she continued. We can't bury our talents, our responsibilities, our purpose. When I saw these children in danger, when I saw that your men wouldn't do anything to save them, I knew it didn't matter what happened to me in the past. What mattered was what I could do now. General Thorne was devastated. Tears he hadn't shed in decades began to roll down his war-scarred face. All his arrogance, all his authority, all his self-justification crumbled before the quiet courage of the woman he had betrayed. Isabella, he began, but couldn't finish. What words could repair 8 years of injustice? What apologies could return a destroyed life?
She disarmed the last device and stood up slowly, wiping the dirt from her hands on her apron. The minefield that had terrified seasoned soldiers was now completely safe, disarmed by a woman who officially no longer existed. "Done," she said simply. "The children can play here now." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, like a dam breaking, emotion overflowed. Soldiers fell to their knees, civilians erupted in tears and applause. Children rushed to embrace the woman who had risked her life to protect them. The military journalist continued filming, knowing he was documenting a moment that would change many lives. But at the center of it all, General Thorne remained motionless, facing the crushing weight of his own actions. He had spent 8 years believing he had done what was necessary to preserve the stability of the army. Now he saw that he had destroyed the life of a genuine hero to protect criminals. Isabella approached him, her expression serene. "General, you have a choice to make now. You can continue living in the lie you built, or you can choose the truth. It's difficult, I know, but it's possible to start over, even after everything." He looked at her, seeing not just the simple woman who had defied his authority, but the brilliant officer he had admired and then betrayed. "How can you forgive me? How can you not hate me after what I did?" Isabella smiled, and for a moment he saw a flash of the young colonel who had been his protégé. "Because hate is just another kind of explosive, General. And I've learned that the only way to disarm hate is with forgiveness." In that moment, something shifted in General Thorne. The armor of arrogance and authority he had built over decades crumbled completely. He knelt before Isabella, before his own soldiers, before everyone. "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking. "Completely wrong. About you, about what it means to be a soldier, about what it means to serve the people. You saved these children, but more than that, you saved me from myself." Isabella helped him to his feet, a gesture that symbolized far more than simple courtesy. It was an act of redemption, a bridge being built over the chasm of betrayal and resentment. "General," she said softly, "you have influence, connections, power. Use that to do what's right. Investigate what really happened 8 years ago. Bring to light the truth that was buried. Not for me, I've found my peace here, but for everyone else who may be suffering similar injustices." In the days that followed, General Thorne began the most important investigation of his career. Not an investigation ordered by superiors or motivated by political ambition, but a genuine search for the truth. He uncovered evidence he had chosen to ignore, witnesses he had been pressured to dismiss, documents he had been instructed to destroy. The investigation revealed a web of corruption that extended through several echelons of the military command. Politicians who had profited from arms trafficking were exposed. Officers who had participated in the scheme were held accountable, and the name of Colonel Isidora Mendez was cleared, her reputation restored posthumously in the official records. When Isabella was offered the opportunity to return to military service with full honors, she thanked them but gently refused. "My place is here now," she said, watching the children play in the field she had made safe. "I've learned there are many ways to serve others, and not all of them involve uniforms or rank." General Thorne, in turn, requested a transfer to humanitarian aid programs. He dedicated the final years of his career not to war, but to rebuilding communities devastated by conflict. He never forgot the lesson he learned that day. The true courage lies not in commanding with authority, but in admitting mistakes and striving to correct them. Isabella's story and the minefield spread far beyond that small village. It became a symbol that justice, even if delayed, is still possible. That forgiveness can be more powerful than revenge. That sometimes the most extraordinary people are those who choose to live seemingly ordinary lives, but who are ready to reveal their true nature when necessary. Years later, when journalists asked Isabella about that extraordinary day, she always responded the same way. "I didn't do anything special. I just remembered that no matter how much we try to outrun ourselves, we can't escape our responsibility to each other. When children are in danger, when injustice prevails, when the truth is buried, someone has to step forward. That day, it just happened to be my turn." But everyone present that day knew it had been much more than that. They had witnessed a miracle of human courage, an example of how forgiveness can transform not only the forgiver, but also the forgiven. They had seen how a person can choose to use their pain to heal others instead of letting it become a source of bitterness and revenge. The village flourished in the following years. The field where terror once reigned became a park where children played freely. And in the center of that park, a garden grew, tended by a woman with calloused hands whom everyone simply called Isabella, but who some older people whispered was the heroine who had proven that true courage needs no uniform, rank, or official recognition. She continued to care for the children, planting flowers and living a life many would consider ordinary. But those who truly knew her understood that there's nothing ordinary about choosing every day to be a force of healing in a wounded world. There's nothing ordinary about forgiving when it would be easier to hold a grudge. There's nothing ordinary about using our greatest talents not for our own glory, but to serve the most vulnerable. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of Isabella's story. That true greatness lies not in being recognized as exceptional, but in choosing to do the right thing even when no one is watching, even when there's no reward, even when the whole world seems to have forgotten who you really are. Because in the end, as she had learned in that minefield, the earth always speaks to those who know how to listen. And sometimes, when we pay attention to what it has to say, we discover that our greatest defeats can become our most significant victories, that our deepest wounds can become sources of our greatest strength, and love and forgiveness are the only weapons truly capable of disarming the hatred and injustice that poison our world. That day, in the face of an arrogant general and a field strewn with death, a simple woman proved that true authority doesn't come from rank or position, but from the courage to do what is right. And in doing so, she not only saved lives, she saved souls, including her own and that of the one who had betrayed her. That is the magic of redemption. It transforms not only the redeemed, but also the redeemer, creating a circle of healing that expands far beyond the initial moment of courage. And so, in a small village few know, In a field that once held only terror and now blossoms with hope, the story continues to unfold. Because stories like this never truly end. They plant themselves in our hearts like seeds, waiting for the right moment to bloom in our own lives, reminding us that we all carry within us the capacity to be extraordinary, if only we have the courage to listen when the earth and our hearts call us to make a difference.